point in the last 50 years, you know that American colleges are basically pretty liberal. But in the past 5 years or so, campuses seem to have been hit by a fever they haven't experienced since the 1960s. Instead of focusing on professional skills or the sweet treats of scholarship, millions of students and professors have made far-left politics their only reason for being at school. The result is this: everybody gets a safe space except white men. They are hated and despised. What is this about exactly? Scott Greer is the author of a new book that considers it. It's called No Campus for White Men, and he joins us in the studio. Scott, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So the hysteria level's rising. That's not my imagination. I went to college at one point. It wasn't like this. What's changed?
Well, what's changed is that over the last 5 years, and it actually extends longer to that, but it's really gravitated toward in the last 5 years, is that identity politics and victimhood culture have taken over higher education. Basically, with the 2 points is identity politics stress that basically all a person should care about is their own narrow group interests and the identity they ascribe to themselves, such as, if I'm an African-American man, that's all my politics, and I only care about furthering the interests of my specific group, African-Americans.
Right.
And that's become dominant on campus because they encourage it through affirmative action and other procedures that encourages people to gravitate towards specific identities for more benefit. And then second, and more important is, in some ways, is victimhood culture, where everybody kind of competes to be the biggest victim. And a lot of people are like, well, why are all these young people trying to pretend to be victims? Nobody wants to be a victim, but the reason why they do that is because we assign moral status in the college moral culture that's being created to who's the bigger victim, who's more oppressed, who's more oppressed gets more status in that moral hierarchy created. And if you're privileged, then that's the worst thing that can happen. And say, like in older moral culture, if you're like demonically possessed, that's the lowest. With this, it's like if you're privileged, that's the worst thing you can be, but being a victim is the best thing you can be. But when your victimhood isn't assigned based on socioeconomic status, you can be the son of a poor coal miner from West Virginia, and you're privileged, and you can be the son of a wealthy multimillionaire, but African-American, and you're oppressed. And that's how the system works.
Now, there's so many ironies in all this. I mean, I guess the first one you sort of noted. I mean, everyone in college is privileged by definition. They're not working for a living. They're learning, which was considered a privilege for like 1,000 years. And the second point is that colleges were designed to be places where people studied universal truths and values rather than narrow and sectarian ones. Why the change? Like, what brought this about? How did it get here?
Well, it is that it wants to pertain to these narrow interests, as I write in No Campus for White Men. It's about building. It's about It's about trying to get to the right views of these people.
Right.
It's trying to, if you have a narrow identity politics, if that's the core being of the political message on campus, everything is designed to please that type of system. So when you have an English course, the fact that Shakespeare and John Milton are the primary writers that are studying that course, that's a problem because they're white males. We need to have more diversity there because of identity politics. People are like, well, I feel left out because I'm reading Shakespeare or John Milton, even though they forget the universal message in those works,
right,
and the message and the great writing. They instead, well, we need to have somebody that reflects this current campus culture that we have. So that's why they kind of they push these type of things on college campus.
You know, I believe everything you say. I don't fully understand the psychology behind it or where it came from, but here's what I know for sure. It doesn't make you happy. We have a video from Yale. I think this is one of the exchanges that precipitated your book, that inspired you to write this. This is a Yale professor, and this is kind of what a lot of them are like. We can roll this.
Your position as master, do you understand that? Then
no, I don't agree with that.
Then why the you accept the position?
Because I
hired you?
I have a different
You
vision.
should step down. If that is what you think about being a master, you should step down. It is not about creating an intellectual space. It is not.
Well, that's just textbook hysteria, but it's also an expression of deep unhappiness. I mean, what was that about?
Absolutely. That, as you said, that inspired No Campus for White Men. That was about because the professor who was defending himself, who was surrounded and kind of undergoing an inquisition, his wife wrote a simple column saying, look, you shouldn't get all bent out of shape about cultural appropriating Halloween costumes. We know how terrible those can be. I mean, that's a real horror in our society if somebody dresses up in a Halloween costume that's considered cultural appropriation. And she merely said, like, look, you're college kids, you're going to do stupid things, just let it be, don't get out of shape about it. But that was like the worst thing that ever happened on this campus. It was like somebody wrote this horrific racist letter to the newspaper. That's how students treated it. And they took out all their anger upon this poor professor, who's actually a liberal himself, who actually sympathized with their cause, but they wouldn't even let him get his viewpoint heard. They just screamed at him and vented their anger. And it was all kind of this ritual humiliation that he was undergoing. And it was really quite shocking when it happened. And that's why it caught the national eye.
It's just so bizarre. Standing on this bucolic, leafy campus in New England fall, 60 grand a year. None of them have jobs, and they're angry. It's so weird. No Campus for White Men is the book. Scott Greer is the author. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.